Do you remember when Dame Elizabeth Rosamond Taylor was born on February 27th, 1932 in London, England, to American parents who'd moved to London and opened an art gallery? Well, you should, because we're going to talk about the final years of Elizabeth Taylor.
You can send it back.
Oh, darling, no one would take that back once they got rid of it.
You can send them all back. The wedding's off.
Kay, what are you saying?
Just that. I'm not going to marry Buckley. I found out something about him that's unforgivable.
Her family moved back to the States in early 1939 due to a little issue that was arising in Europe, World War II. Her father would open a new art gallery in LA, and his family would then settle in Beverly Hills. Hibby. Liz's striking appearance with her lilac eyes and thick lashes brought encouragement from everyone for her to audition for films. Finally, in 1941, she did, auditioning for both MGM and Universal Studios. Both offered her contracts. Her family opted for Universal, but after one small role in There's One Born Every Minute, Liz wasn't offered any more roles, and her contract was terminated a year later. They said she didn't have the face of a child star. Her eyes were too old. But Liz found herself at MGM once again when an acquaintance of her father's had her audition for Lassie Come Home in 1942, which eventually led to her first starring role in National Velvet at the tender age of 12. She would go on to be one of Hollywood's greatest film actresses, bridging both old and new Hollywood. And you can argue about that all you want, but the American Film Institute named her the 7th greatest female screen legend in American history. Her love life, however, was at times more prolific than her career. Here's a quick roundup from the last few weeks of our mini-series for Elizabeth Taylor. Her first marriage at 18 was to Conrad Nicky Hilton. Her second marriage was to Michael Wilding. She was a week shy of her 20th birthday. Her third marriage was to Mike Todd when she was 24. Her fourth marriage was to Eddie Fisher when she was 27. Her fifth marriage was to Richard Burton when she was 32, and her sixth marriage was also to Richard Burton when she was 43. Her seventh marriage to John Warner was when she was 44, and finally her eighth marriage was to Larry Fertensky at 59. When looking back at Liz's relationships, it's important to look at it through the lens of someone that was raised during a time when women had very little power, even for those who had Liz's fame and fortune. When Liz turned 18, women were going to university not to gain an education, but to find a husband. Harvard's medical school wouldn't even accept female students for another 5 years. Women couldn't open a bank account on their own until the 1960s, and couldn't even get a credit card until 1974. But still, why would Elizabeth accept her first proposal at the age of 16 when she was still just a child attending high school? She once said, "I think I ended up being the Scarlet Woman partly because of my rather puritanical upbringing and beliefs. I couldn't just have a romance. It had to be marriage." Not to mention that there was intense focus on a woman's desirability and her ability to attract a mate. God forbid you die a spinster. And if anyone embodied the feminine ideal of the time, it was Elizabeth Taylor. But while the fighting and the affairs, well, divorce wasn't that simple back when Liz first started getting married. You had to prove one of the 3 A's had occurred: abuse, abandonment, or an affair. And often the expectation was on the wife to try to make things better with her husband rather than a divorce being granted. Cheat on Eddie Fisher and the judge can't force you to make it better, can he? Apart from her relationships, Liz also had some very interesting friendships. There was Montgomery Clift, who Liz starred in A Place in the Sun with. When he found out that 17-year-old Liz would be playing his love interest, he exclaimed, "Who the hell is Elizabeth Taylor?" Liz represented everything Monty hated about Hollywood. He didn't view her as a serious actress, but as a product for the audience's consumption. Liz, on the other hand, was intimidated by him. He researched roles, was a serious method actor, where she acted on instinct. Not to mention the fact that she found the 29-year-old quite handsome. Liz valued his talent and his wit, which made him even more attractive to her, and he did eventually see her appeal. Their chemistry was so intense that those close to the pair thought that they were having an affair, and even though they were caught smooching in a limo or two, Monty couldn't bring himself to tell Liz that he was gay. And so he kept things platonic, but eventually their friendship grew and they became close enough for him to confide in her about his sexuality. She reacted by trying to think of older gay men that she could fix him up with. In 1959, she saved his life when he crashed into a telephone pole after leaving a party at her house. The two would go on to appear in 2 more films together and remained good friends until his passing in 1966. politics. Then there was her friendship with Michael Jackson, which developed in the 80s after Liz attended one of his concerts. The two bonded over the fact that they were both child stars who didn't really get a childhood. She was the first to dub him the king of pop, and they often told each other that they loved one another, like brother and sister. He wrote her a song in 1997 called Elizabeth, I Love You, and after his passing in 2009, she wrote, I will always love Michael from the depth of my being, and nothing can separate us. Just a note, Michael Jackson is a sensitive topic. Please keep the comments respectful, as I have been respectful in my approach to this part of the story. Speaking of 2009, that also happened to be the year that she met Colin Farrell. Colin met Liz at Cedars-Sinai Hospital in LA when he was there for the birth of his son, Henry. After taking Henry home, he got to thinking of Liz and how she was doing, so he asked his publicist if he could send Liz some flowers. His publicist happened to be looking at an orchid that very moment that Elizabeth Taylor had sent for him. Colin asked if she could arrange a meeting with Miss Taylor, and that kicked off a friendship that would last until Liz's passing. They bonded over their shared nightly insomnia, and he would often call her in the early hours of the morning. Her nurse would answer, and he would ask, is she up? Colin had said of the relationship that it was kind of like the last, it feels like in my head, not her, I'm projecting, but the last kind of romantic relationship I had, which was never consummated. Would have been kind of awkward with the nurses watching. He also said that he would have liked to have been her 8th husband, but they ran out of road. I'm guessing he only counted the Burton era as one marriage. Looking past her relationships, both romantic and platonic, Liz did an incredible amount of work for AIDS research and activism, with both a founding role in the American Foundation for AIDS Research and the establishment of the Elizabeth Taylor AIDS Foundation. And she did that during a time when people were terrified of this unknown disease and were treating those with AIDS, especially gay men, horrifically. She rallied her peers to support the funding of research and even testified before Congress to help establish the Ryan White Comprehensive AIDS Resources Emergency Act, which would help improve the care and treatment for low-income people with AIDS and HIV. You can say what you want about Elizabeth Taylor, but she lived the heck out of life. Despite all the heartbreak and years of illness, she still showed up for those that she loved in the communities that she cared about. Elizabeth passed away on March 23, 2011, at the age of 79, with a legacy so much greater than that of a pretty face with a collection of engagement rings.